the big section, the largest data collection of end of year, which is end of year 3. So it may take the most amount of time. It may not. We don't know, but we'll just go through it and talk about how we can prepare for the submission. So this is end of year 3, behavioral incidents, absenteeism, cumulative enrollment preparation, among other things. All right, so, when we think about the end of year 3 data collection and in terms of previewing it, we're going to again talk about the data submitted, right? So the big thing is student incidents, right? They generate, among other things, a statewide indicator, right? The incidents go to your suspension rate, but also the state generates expulsion rates. That's going to come from the incident data in CALPADS. Individuals Disabilities Act there's 3 reports dedicated to students with disability and their incidents. UMERS, your persistently dangerous schools, data comes from those incidents. There's a lot of data, not just state indicator. Your homeless data, it's subgroup data. So homeless students are usually identified in disadvantaged subgroups for end of year 1, right? Subgroup information is needed for your CTE reports and Carl Perkins. But the McKinney-Vento Act, which protects the educational rights of homeless students, is reported, and they're needed for accountability. So that's the homeless data collection. It's a program, and the reason why it's not submitted in end of year 2 as it previously was is that districts will certify end of year 2 first, but continually submit program records from the time they certify, which is the start, early in May, until August, or until July 1st, when the new academic year starts. And there was a noticeable discrepancy. So they just moved homeless data to align with end of year so that the reports can be consistent. And then you have cumulative enrollment. Again, this is taken from your exits and enrollment submitted throughout the year. It's not a specific submission needed in this data collection other than exiting your students. However, the cumulative enrollment helps determine rates, right? So your suspension rate, your absenteeism rate. Although the truancy data does not come from CALPADS, that cumulative enrollment that serves as the denominator is used for the truancy rate. So any rate you can think of related to a subset or subgroup of students compared to the overall population is probably going to use the cumulative enrollment that comes out of CALPADS. And then your absent summary, right? Again, chronic absenteeism is a state indicator. Your RFEP subgroup data. So this is just a logical change. I think this is the 2nd year it's been added to end of year 3. Previously, we used to do some crazy stuff, right? Census day to census day was the comparison. Now, all the students who are RFEP throughout the entire academic year are counted in end of year. So it's logical that this group is included at the end. And then 1-year grads and completers. So the big cohort report, right? That's how we look at the 4-year cohort. We look at the students who are graduating and exiting, those who complete in 4 years. But that's not the totality of success stories for our students, right? Some students graduate a year early, some are grad late, or graduate years later, like 5th or 6th year. And so the 1-year grad count accounts for those students that you don't see indicated on that 4-year cohort report. It's also needed for DAS schools. So that is part of the end of year 3 data collection. So you can see, until, I guess it will always be the largest data collection, even next year. Fall 1's going to grow in file submissions, but end of year is going to grow as well. So it is the largest data collection. So when we talk about files submitted specifically to generate data for end of year, you need those 3 files to submit a single incident, right? SINC, the SIRS, the SOF, student incident, student results, and offense. As we are encouraging to submit these files early, you have to understand the relationship between these files. The SINC and the SIRS must be submitted for you to see a result in CALPADS, both in the reports and on the student profile. So if you submit just the student incident record and try to look up that student in CALPADS under their detail screen, you won't see anything. You need this incident and the results at the very least. And for your reports, all those offenses that were committed and resulted in all those offenses committed during the incident that have some kind of result, you need to account for those as well. So just, make sure that you complete the incident, the SIRS and the SOF prior to looking at your reports or prior to looking for student records, because it won't be accurate. They're tied closely together. The student absenteeism is generated again from your attendance. So while we don't look at attendance in CALPADS, we do have an absenteeism summary, and that's generated automatically, I think, from every SIS. Submit that file now. You don't necessarily need the student to be exited. You could talk to your vendor, but we learned definitely that Equitas' solution, their SIS, you can submit the stats now, and you can get, an estimation of that student's attendance to this given date, to whatever date you submit it. We know that if your school hasn't ended, they're going to continue to have, more expected days, more absences and days attendance. But if you trigger any errors in the submission of this file, you can resolve those errors and identify what is being reported incorrectly now, as opposed to waiting. A lot of times, because, I know that my attendance isn't going to be fully accounted for until after the last day of school, I'm gonna wait that long to start my submission. You don't have to wait, and that's one of the main focuses of this, primer is you don't have to wait to submit these files. Cumulative enrollment, again, those are the exit. That's going to be derived from the exits and enrollments, or the enrollments and exits throughout the year. So that's one thing that may not have, an accurate reporting until the last day of school, but it's something you could review. You can review that account on day one with no effort, right? Because you've already been enrolling and submitting SENR records throughout the year. So that definitely will have data to represent without a submission. Your graduates and completers, you can't account for these students until you submit their exits, right? Because the E230, 100, or E230/ whatever are all your completers. So you can't identify your graduates and completers until you're ready to exit those students. So it's really hard to get an estimation of those students. Your homeless program records, again, you're submitting those throughout the year. You should be checking your report data. Again, they have to be verified once yearly, just once yearly. That could be upon enrollment. You want to look at your homeless counts and verify if they're accurate as soon as possible. And then your RFEP students, those students reclassify throughout the year. So it's important to look at those students, right? Because RFEP is synonymous with long-term EL, right? So your students who are long-term ELs, because they haven't been able to reclassify as fluent and proficient. So it's, it's an important data set. It's a measure of how well you're serving your students who are English learners. And so you want to, see if, with your language coordinator, see if these counts are accurate. And then staff involved with the submission. Again, it's the largest data collection. It's hard to imagine that there's any staff that don't contribute to this data collection, right? So you have site administrators, each of your individual school sites, your district administrators, should be involved. Your EL coordinators at individual schools, or one if you have one for your district. Again, special education staff, because we have 3 reports dedicated to students with disabilities. And end of year 3, you have your attendance clerks. They have to understand which codes to use. So, if a student should be temporarily not enrolled because they went to juvenile hall for 2 weeks, right? We don't want to disenroll them, but we don't want to mark them absent. Things like that, they need to know. For STAS, and NPS school staff. So incidents, if we have students at NPS schools, their primary enrollments, we're required to report incidents for them. So we'll talk about that in 2 slides from now, but you have to communicate with the NPS school staff. So when we're thinking about the file submission activities that we can be doing right now, this is similar to what you see in end of year 1 and end of year 2. You have your SENR, your CELA, and your program. This data is submitted throughout the year. You don't need a specific submission for end of year 3. You should be updating these files as data changes. I would imagine at least monthly. Maybe you submit data to CALPADS weekly. Some people do it daily. Whatever your process is, it shouldn't require a specific submission for end of year 3 because this should all be ongoing. And, they're all transaction, which is the most common file type processing method that we have. So you should be familiar with how to submit these files. There's no nuance. You can submit individual students and they won't impact other records. So, there's not much to talk about there. I don't see any questions, so I trust you all got that. Now going to your STAS, your sync, SIRS, and SOF, these are replacement file types. You can see they all are. And again, the operational keys are for school attendance, academic year, and SSID. So again, with replacement files, you submit the full data set, right? Because the file will replace all records with the same operational key on upload, not necessarily post, but on upload. If you have a large district and schools end at different times, when you look at the operational key, you see school of attendance. If school A ends like the school district that my kids go to in Kyron's, even Marshall has some kids in that school district, they have different calendars. They don't all have the same calendar. I don't know how common that is throughout the state, but theoretically, our school district could submit files for individual schools without impacting the schools that are still ongoing, because school of attendance is an operational key. So that's something to consider. You can segment your submissions if you understand how that the files process and what the operational keys are. So that's why we provide this information to you. And this is all in the CFS Word document on the CALPADS system documentation page. This isn't anything secret, it's public information. We just want to bring it to your attention again, because we hope to extend the submission period for you all and give you the tools to start early. The sync, the SIRS, and the SOF, again, to reiterate, they submit the incidents, the results of those incidents, and the offenses. The offense is generally the reason why we are submitting the incident in the first place. They include the school of attendance, academic year ID, and incident local ID. So again, a logical segment of submission could be by school of attendance. Same with the STAS records, right? If your schools end with different academic calendars, the last day of school, you can submit your SIRS. I don't suggest waiting to the last day of school, right? I would submit these files now just to resolve errors if any of them arise, identify any erroneous records. However, if the last day of the year comes in May 15th for a segment of schools, if you submit the sync, SIRS, and SOF for those schools, and that data goes through, with no problems, that you're done. You don't necessarily need to replace that. You could remove those schools from your next submission and submit only those that are continued to, it's just a way of segmenting your submission, right? A lot of people are hesitant with full replacement files just because of our unfamiliarity with them. And the service desk is open. So if you have any apprehension, just work with your service desk agents or ask for your monitor and we can walk you through it. And so, as I kind of forementioned, there's pain points. When we talk about NPS school reporting, it's always difficult because this is someone who's employed outside our organization and students that we often are not familiar with because they are receiving the majority of their instruction outside our LEA, right? But we are required, and NPS schools are specifically called out in education code, that they have to provide the same information, not more, but the same information with regards to student discipline, right? And behavioral incidents. And this really became a point of emphasis with behavioral incidents because some of these schools are residential schools. And, sometimes, the more challenging students to educate for whatever reason don't necessarily commit offenses outlined in EDGE code, but there's reasons to restrain or seclude them from the other students for their own safety or for the safety of other students. It could just be calming down, what have you, but any incident of restraint or seclusion has to be reported. And so, this has been a point of emphasis. However, getting that information can be difficult. And so we did some things to assist you all rather than just say, hey, this is what you got to do, figure it out, right? We try to facilitate a way to gain that information. So I'm going to the Figmat CSIS website under resources, and then I'm going to expand the full list of resources. And then because I'm kind of lazy, I think I can find MPS. So there's a student discipline reporting presentation video transcript. For a couple years ago, we did this twice. Brandy and Shiloh from special education, Brandy's in special education now. At the time, she was working in the CALPADS office, recorded a video, and it was directed to MPS coordinators. Since they don't do this every year, there may have been change, the information may have been lost. I suggest copying this link, knowing that it's here, and when you talk to your MPS school coordinators, you can explain to them, you have to report this information. There's specific data elements I need you to tell me so I can put this in my system. Here's some background. And I think it was 45 minutes to an hour. It's not long. They can, watch it on a faster speed if they don't have time, but it's a resource for them. It's a resource for you. Same with the MPS incident guide, right? It's a spreadsheet, all the different documents that related to discipline reporting relevant to MPS schools were compiled in one Excel spreadsheet, and this can tell them, the different codes, the fields that they need to provide to you so that you can input this data into your student information system. And then, of course, PowerPoint from last year. So there's 3 resources that you can provide once you submit that request, and work with your SEDS data coordinator, because the MPS school enrolled students are students with disabilities. I would imagine that you all are doing the enrollment, so you should know if you have MPS students or not. However, if that data eludes you, you can go into CALPADS and look for the school code 000001. And if you have any students enrolled under that school code, you want to find out if they have been were involved in any incidents and collect that data. And then certification reports. Again, we go over this in more detail for advanced, but specifically a great level of detail for fall 1, reporting certification. All the red or orangish red, I don't know what color this is, salmon, Marshall's favorite color. Not his favorite food though. These are your aggregate reports. These are reports that have to be reviewed to certify. So you can see there's a great deal of them. And then your supporting reports are shown here as well. This is the detail. This is how you investigate those reports. This is the student list. You see the name and the details of the students. And then I also like to point out report 7.16, report 7.17, and report 7.8. You can see students with disabilities on each report. These are the 3 reports specific to your students with disabilities. So again, the inclusion of your CELPA, your SEDS data coordinator, and your MPS school, because you got to collect information, right? And then understanding your reports is pretty significant. And if you understand which report provides pertinent information, if you use the CALPADS user manual and the report mapping guides, you can see how the reports are counted and how to identify things, right? So one of the big things is we report results based on the incident, right? So we don't give you a list of suspensions. So if you're trying to estimate your suspension rate before it's released or before it's on the dashboard, it's hard to do, right? But that's useful information, because one of the things we hear is no one looks at CALPADS until it's too late. They get the dashboard results, then they come back with questions. So you want to forecast and estimate if you can. And so to do that, right, the closest estimate you're going to get is going to come from CALPADS. The information's in your student system as well. But again, then we're not individually looking at your systems. It's coming from CALPADS. So, again, just to reiterate or tell you why CALPADS provides the best estimations in terms of the dashboard, if it's not apparent. So you want to know what to report. So again, the suspension rate is a big indicator. You're going to have your cumulative enrollment report, and you're going to have your discipline reports. Well, we don't make it easy, right? There's nothing automated in CALPADS. So 7.12 incident result student list, even though it's not a quick and easy count, it does provide you a way to count yourself of the individual suspensions, because you have your incident result code. You can extract this file from CALPADS in Excel format, filter only for 110 and 100 out-of-school suspensions and in-school suspensions. Count, scroll down. Excel will give you a count of those records. That's your list of suspensions. Then you have your cumulative enrollment. You can, do your mathematical equation and get an estimation of what your suspension rate would look like. You don't have to do it. You can provide those two reports and give it to, whoever analyzes suspension rates for your district, whether it's your superintendent or someone else, your assistant superintendent, whoever that person is. But this is the information. Maybe you walk them through how and explain why, because we're not going to give you a count of suspensions. We don't do that. We'll give you a count of suspensions for incidents, which can be convoluted and inflated. So you want this count. You want to go to column 14 and then filter just for your suspensions, and every individual suspension reported throughout the entire academic year would become available. Doing this early in the submission window helps. Also, looking at your students who have 511 and there are grades K through 8, right? Because if they were suspended with a 511 offense code, they need another incident reported or another offense reported for that incident, because 511 is willful defiance, and it's illegal to suspend a student solely for willful defiance, grades K through 8. So your administrators may have omitted, okay, the student was defiant, but they also committed this offense before the defiance or, with the defiance. So those are things to be aware of, and, the value of looking at your reports early. And then there's several resources. I honestly didn't find every resource relevant to end of year 3. There's just too many. But these are the more relevant resources, and there's direct links. There's the user manual, YouTube training videos, and these are links to playlists. There's several videos in each playlist. So I don't, if you're not familiar with the YouTube training channel, and these videos are also in Bridge, but you can go to a specific data population video. So if you're not familiar with student absence summary, there's a data population video. Same with discipline. And then relevant FAQs. The higher the number, the more recent the flash, so on and so forth. So that's end of year 3. I don't know how long that took, Matt. I don't think it was an hour.
Not quite.
But it felt like it.
All right.